Consultant senior în cadrul Diviziei Internaționale a Profiles International, este consultant senior în cadrul Diviziei Internaționale a Profiles International și a petrecut aproape toată cariera în poziții manageriale de vânzări și marketing. După mai mulți ani alături de Mindless calculatoare și Hewlett Packard și-a înființat propria companie de consultanță în vânzări. Activitatea de consultanță l-a adus în contact cu Profiles International în urmă cu 14 ani. Deiric McCann este autorul a 4 cărți de business și are peste 1000 de articole publicate în întreaga lume. Cea mai mare pasiune a sa este însă oratoria. Deiric McCann participă ca speaker la evenimente, conferințe, seminare, workshop-uri de 2 sau de 3 ori pe lună și a dinamizat audiențe între 300 și 1000 de participanți în peste 800 de speech-uri în întreaga lume.
Până Deiric se montează, ca să spun așa, știu că sună rău în limba română, vă aduc aminte că astăzi mai avem o tragere la sorți pentru 10 ședințe de coach. Cine a uitat să-și pună aici cartea de vizită, să ridice mâna. Dacă mă plimb acum, îmi puneți repede cărțile de vizită până Deiric se pregătește? Hai! Repede, pentru că veți beneficia la sfârșitul acestei zile de tragere la sorți. Cele 2 ședințe de coaching, 10, vor fi oferite de Anta și de Diana. O să le cunoașteți mai încolo. Scuze? Nu uitați, cine nu participă, nu câștigă, da? Știți aia cu n-am noroc la loto că nu câștig. Știți de ce, da? Că nu pui bilet. Cine mai? Trimiteți-o din mână în mână până la mine. Așa, bravo, super. Cine are mai multe, poate să-și încerce norocul. Eu mă uit ce băgați aici, oricum. Cine mai are, cine mai dorește, cine mai poftește. Așa, Max Relax, lăsăm să intre. Nu, l-am lăsat data trecută. Mai e cineva? Am sărit pe cineva? Trimite-o, te rog frumos. Fără frică, ne ajutăm unii pe alții. Că doar lucrăm în resurse umane. Așa? Bravo. Super. Mersi mult. Ești sigură? Da? Bine. O să ți-o dăm înapoi dacă vrei. Dau cauți tu, da? Că nu-ți decât vreo 200 și ceva de cărți de vizită aici, așa că... Opa, perfect. Bravo. Hai, să le strângem. Lilia, ai făcut o treabă extraordinară. E datorită ție se umple bolul ăsta, nu datorită mie. Să știi. Zici tu 4, că 13 număr cu inimă. Nu, zi 4 în loc de 3. Poți să zici 4 în loc de 3. Sau 2. Așa simți tu? Lasă 3. Deci avem 13 ședințe de coaching, din care 3 sunt oferite de Lilia aici de față. Cine dă mai mult? Că văd că suntem ca la licitație. Mai are cineva dorința să fie sprijinit în dezvoltare? Am să zic coach-uit, dar mi-era frică să nu greșesc cuvântul. Sorry, boss, do you? I don't want to say some different things. Okay, Deiric McCann.
I want you to notice what happened when I rang that bell. Okay? The most obvious thing was the room came to a new sort of attention. You started looking my direction, physically. You went quieter. Some of you looked puzzled. And that was the obvious outside effect of ringing that bell. But inside every single one of you, every single one of us, something happened when I rang that bell. And I have no way of knowing what happened inside you when you heard that bell.
Sorry, I am okay.
Oh my God. That was really bad. This one? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So when you heard the bell, everybody came to a new kind of attention. That was the obvious thing that happened.
But inside, every single one of us, oh my God, I love technology. Oh my God, I feel like God up here. I have come. But inside every one of you, you also reacted. And I cannot tell what went on inside you when you heard that bell. For some of you, you may have said, did that Irish guy just ring a Tibetan meditation bell? Oh my God, get me out of here. So while outwardly you appeared to be settling and coming to attention, inwardly you were cringing and looking for the closest door. Okay? Some of you may have said, oh my God, the Irish guy just rang a little Tibetan meditation bell. This is going to be good. I can't know what happened inside you, but what happened inside you is a demonstration of a singularly remarkable capability that, as far as we know, we are the first species on this planet to possess. And that is the simple ability to be able to observe what's going on outside of us, and at the same time, observe ourselves inside. To see how we're reacting to something outside. To be in two places at the one time. To have meta-attention. And that is a unique capability. And it's a unique capability that we as business people and leaders can turn into a unique ability to be an altogether better leader. So today, many times, I'm going to use the phrase, what did you notice? Let me start my timing. I'll ask you, what did you notice? And when I ask you, what do you notice? What I'm looking for is for you just to stop and think in that moment and drop into yourself and say, do I feel hot or cold? Do I feel comfortable or settled? Do I feel any sort of sensation in my body? What's going through my head? Is my hair standing on the back of my neck? Whatever. When I say, what did you notice? I'll be asking you to pull upon that capability to drop inside yourself and be attentive. We are the first species in billions of years of evolution on this planet to be able to do this. And this is the entire message of my presentation today. My message is, you need to pay attention. Now, how many people here have anything to do with selling? So you're in marketing or in sales. Okay, so about maybe, 10% of the audience. Let me say, how many of the people who are left ever have to convince anybody that their idea is a good one? Okay, we all do it, right? At some stage we all have to sell. Let me tell you the hardest audience to sell to. These people. These are household names, tremendously successful because they do not give their money away easily. If they give you money, it's because they have done an analysis that says, I'll get a better return giving these people my money than I could putting it in a bank or giving it to DMAC. So they've made a judgment that anything they invest in is a good investment, will get a good return on investment. Every single one of the organizations up here have invested in making their leaders and their people more mindful. They didn't do that because they're wackos. They didn't do it because they're spiritual people. They didn't do it because they bought into some 2,500-year-old technology. They did it because it made commercial sense. And I say that to you simply because some of you will come to this presentation today and you'll have preconceptions about what I'm going to talk about. And we, as humans, we are either generally open or closed. We get an idea, we analyze it, and we decide what our position is. Here's what I'm asking you to do today. Consider that these people must have had darn good reason to invest in what we're talking about today. And just allow me to have the benefit of an open mind for about an hour and 20 minutes. And at the end you could say, I'm closing it all up again, and you didn't sell me. Okay? Now, what is mindfulness? Sometimes it's easier to describe something by describing what it's not. So let's look at mindlessness, which is the opposite of mindfulness. And this is where I'm going to need your help. If you've ever stood in front of an audience and you've said, help me out, and nothing happened, you know how horrible that is. Don't do it to me. I'm a nice guy. Help me out. I'm going to put some numbers up. We are going to add them as a group, out loud. And I really need this to be done out loud. So as I put a number up, I want you to go 1,000. And then add the next one, 1,000 and... No, it's not 5,000. So let's just take another look at that if you don't mind. Let's go again. Because I know that it's early in the morning. Some of you haven't had your coffee. So let's go through this just one more time to see if we can get it right. So we got 1,000. Come on, louder, louder. For the recording, make me look good. Now you get that. I mean, the reality was we got 1,000, 1040, 2040, 304, or 2070, 3070, 3090, 4090, and then most of the brains in the room went and said 5,000, when in fact it was 4,100. For a moment, you were mindless. What happened was it went 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and around 3,000 your brain switched off and said, I know where this is going, all about 4,000, 5,000. He must think I'm stupid. You switched off. You became mindless. If you had been mindful, if your attention had been fully on this, you would have resisted the autopilot and you'd have said 4,100 and nobody would have heard you because the rest of them were all saying 5,000. Take a look at this one. Pick a card, any card, focus on that card and look into my eyes. Okay? Is your card gone? Magic, right? No, absolutely not. Mindless. Because in actual fact, none of the cards are in the second picture. What I've done is I've taken them all away. But by giving you a certain instruction, I diverted your attention so that when you get to this one, and you do this with your kids, they will think you are just wonderful. It worked, and not just your kids. For a moment, you're mindless. You didn't take in all of the information that was available to take in. And we do it all the time. We call it habit. And sometimes we're very proud. We say, oh, I can do that practically on autopilot. You know, I can do that without thinking. That's exactly what you're doing. You're doing it without thinking. And most of the time, that's not a problem. But sometimes there are more serious consequences to becoming mindless. Let me give you a clear example.
At the moment, the Spanish train left the tracks near Santiago de Compostela in what is being described as one of the country's worst rail disasters. 78 people are now confirmed dead, with 130.
Now, in actual fact, 79 people died in that last year in Santiago de Compostela. A train went into a bend too fast and went off the track. We all saw it. 79 people were killed. They were killed because of mindlessness. They were killed because the driver, who was an experienced, mature, responsible adult, not a boy trying to race his train, because he was on his phone, because he was engaged with something else, and he went on autopilot, and he had done that trip so many times, he had gone into that bend so many times, it had come out perfectly so many times, he did not notice that he was doing twice the speed that was the maximum speed for that bend, and 79 people died. Now, happily, the majority of us in the room today don't work in jobs where becoming mindful or mindless for a moment results in 79 people dying. But you know, in lots and lots of ways, it results in lots and lots of small cuts. And you've heard the expression, the death of 1,000 cuts. The lack of attention is the worst contagion we have in our society today, because we have so many things demanding our attention. Our phones, our iPads, our computers, our email, and so on and so forth. So attention is a very, very short supply. Now, so let me give you a layman's definition. I have purposely chosen not to give you the technical definition of mindfulness. This is mindfulness as it applies to you and I in business. It is being in the here and now, being right here, watching what's going on. It is not, and here's the important thing for us and the people who work for us, it is not being lost in thought, it's not being distracted, and it's not being overwhelmed by difficult emotions. The majority of people in this world today spend the majority of their time overwhelmed by difficult emotions. That's why we have such an epidemic of stress in the Western world. Mindfulness is a cure for that problem. If you're being mindless, if you're not being mindful, you're automatically running on autopilot. You're assuming that the way things worked before is the way they'll work in the future. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. You're coming into the bend that, such as the bend that you've traveled through 20 times, 30 times, 100 times before, and because you've done it successfully, you're not paying attention to what's going on. It means that you're working off old information. In a world, by the way, that is moving so quickly that old information can be 60 seconds old in your world or my world, right? It means that you are blind to the current context. It means you are behaving on instinct. If you're mindful, you're doing the opposite. If you're mindful, you're situated right here. You're watching what's going on. You're doing what my colleague said, you're being aware. Because it all starts with awareness. Watching what's going on in the moment. It means that your responses to current information or your responses are to current information. You're sensitive to what's going on right now, and you can choose if you want to say, hey, I have a pattern, I have a program for this that I can use, or you can say, no, this is slightly different. And here's the important thing. And I'll use a great quotation later from a Harvard professor that talks to this. If you are in the moment, experience your life right now, you are by definition engaged. And what do we see in almost all of the presentations as we got here at the beginning of this conference? We want engaged people. Mindful people, people who are in the moment, paying attention to what's going on, are engaged. So if you're a leader, one of the professors that I quote later on says, by definition, your role is to distribute mindfulness within your organization, which is an interesting thought. But here's an interesting point. First thing is, no matter what you're doing, where you're doing it, whether you're at work, you're at home, you are either doing it mindfully or you're doing it mindlessly. It's a binary situation. You cannot be both. You're either here in the moment or you're off in the past or away in the future. You're one or the other. It's binary. And look at all of the studies that have been done in the last 30, 40 years, and what you find is everything. Whether it's creativity, whether it's health, competence, psychological well-being. When you're mindful, it's better. When you're living in the moment, you're better. You are your best possible self. So, that's why people like this are investing shed loads of money into creating mindful environments. LG has committed a couple of billion this year. Samsung have rolled out a program to bring to 225,000 people worldwide programs to help them become mindful. Why? Not because they're really good corporate citizens, and I'm sure they are, but because they have worked out from the research, people who are mindful are less stressed. People who are less stressed are more engaged. People that are more engaged are more productive, and people that are more productive are more profitable. It works for business. And it produces, in every single situation that you look at, the studies, it produces results you would not believe. This is 6,400 people in If Insurance in Sweden. You can read this as well as I can, but let me ask you, can you think of any other way that you could get so broad and so deep an impact upon the people that work for you. Look at that, 88% of participants reported a greater ability to stay focused. Most of us, because of our telephones, our email, and everything is around us, we have the attention span of a goldfish. You know the goldfish, 1 second attention span? Oh, look at that Irish guy with the big nose. Round again. Oh, look, there's an Irish guy with a big nose. Oh. Actually, I wondered, when I saw your video, I thought, I would never get my portrait done like that. Because I know that all there'll be on the page is a nose. On both pages. And the rest they just won't see. That's by the by. Transport for London are a huge organisation responsible for implementing the strategy for that fast-growing city for transport. Again, I think it was 1,250 people. Look at this. Days off for stress, anxiety, and depression, which is the epidemic in our Western world, fell by 71%. Absences for all conditions have 80% reported improvements in our relationships. There's a great English expression. Happy wife, happy life. If your relationship improves, pretty much everything improves. This stuff works. That's why these people are investing in it. And what's really wonderful about it is it's very, very easy to implement. So how do we bring this to leadership? Why did I call this mindful leadership or being a mindful leader? Let's roll the clock back and let's look at the modern age of leadership development. The modern age of leadership development started in the 70s when we had the birth of the competency model. The idea that every leadership position, every position indeed, had a set of easily or at least readily identifiable behaviors which, if deployed by the people in that position, would get the results that were required to get. So we said, we can look at leaders, figure out how they need to behave in order to get the best possible results, then see if they're doing that, and if not, help them to be able to deploy those behaviors. And that has been the golden age of leadership development. There has been more good work done in the 70s on how we consistently, in a structured manner, develop leaders than there was in the previous 100 years. Now, I was about to ask a question. I don't have to ask it because I see very few of you are wearing headphones. And that tells me that you have gone through the pain of learning a language. You've gone through, and it is a pain, right? It's not something that, well, very few people find it pleasurable. It is hard work. And it goes through, learning a language goes through the same learning cycle as almost anything else. On day one, when you take off, let's say on the x-axis, on the y-axis, I beg your pardon, you've got amount of knowledge that you have of your new language. And on the x-axis, you've got time. On day two, you've taken off like a rocket. Because, you know, from the first moment you start learning, the learning curve is like this. Today you know twice as much as you knew yesterday, and day 3 you knew twice as much as you knew on day 2, and you just say to yourself, as I did, my God, honey, I said to my wife, 3 months' time, I'll be speaking French like de Gaulle. It's easy. I'm learning so much, and what happens? You take off like a rocket, and then you hit that plateau. You're still doing the same thing, same amount of work, applying the same principles, and it's like you're pouring all of this work in and nothing is happening. And you're on that plateau, and that plateau tends to kill people like me. And it did. Ask Stefan about my French. I gave up. So I gave up. My wife kept going. What people discover when they hit that plateau is what got us here won't get us there. They have to start doing something new. And so you start maybe getting out and talking to French people. And you start listening to French television. And you start using the little bit you learn. And suddenly you hit this takeoff point, and again you're off like a rocket. And eventually you plateau, and it goes like that. Well, leadership development has plateaued. The competency model, the return on investment we get from pure exploitation of the competency model as an approach for leadership development has plateaued. It doesn't mean it's irrelevant. It just means that it's no longer enough. we no longer get the same return as we expected to in the past. Now, lots of the researchers have been doing a lot of work to see where do we go from here. And one of those is a think tank, I think they're out of Belgium, called the Center for Creative Leadership. So they're a research organization, and they've come up with a model which they call, very imaginatively, I'll show you the name now in a moment. They've come up with a model that says, hey, you've still got to have competencies and behaviors as part of your mix. But there are other things that you have to consider as well if you want to get the results you're looking for. So they say you cannot throw out the baby with the bathwater. You must continue with this, and you have to consider 3 other things: circuitry, inner content, and conscious engagement. And they called their model, with such enormous imagination, the Beyond Competencies model. You can imagine somebody sat up all night brainstorming on that, and then the clever ones went to bed, and somebody went to press. The Beyond Competency model. Give me a break, okay? So the Beyond Competency model, really, this is a fantastic white paper for anybody involved in developing leaders. And if you haven't seen it, let Doro or one of his people know. He has a copy for me, and he'll get a copy to you. Now, let's talk about what they talk about, their extra elements in there. What they're saying is, in the last 30 years, we have learned more about who we are and how we're wired and how we're put together than we did in the rest of human history. And we have to consider that when we go to develop people. And the first part they say is we have to consider is your circuitry. I love that. Now, I really like that. Circuitry. You have to consider the way you're wired. You have to consider the fact that you are a physical, chemical, and neurological machine. That you are functioning inside a unit that operates in a lot of situations on autopilot. Your body just keeps firing. It keeps working physically, chemically, and neurologically. And it was bred to do one job and one job only, really. Or at least it was bred to do many jobs, but the one that it remembers was protect me. Keep me safe. Because at the time when this machine, your body, your brain, started to develop, there were life-threatening situations all around us. In a couple of million years, we've risen to the top of the tree. We are not a threat to everybody else. We are a threat to ourselves. We have no longer any real life-threatening situations. But you know what? That tiny little reptile brain inside our heads that was developed several 100 million years ago doesn't know that. And we need to fix that. The good news is that all the research in the last 30 years, and by the way, my friend Dr. Scott Hamilton told me after my last presentation, he said, Eric, I'm going to do a weight wise. He said, you've got to tell him about cortical remapping and things like that. And apparently, 30 years ago, this is where this research started, with stroke victims. They started looking at stroke victims, and with a stroke victim, you've essentially got parts of the brain that have been burnt away. And what the researchers discovered was the brain rebuilt those burnt away parts very often in a different part of the brain, brick by brick, and recreated that functionality in a process they called cortical remapping. And what we discovered was all of the thinking we had up to then that our brain was a fixed thing that we were born with and we died with was wrong. It's something that grows and matures according to what we feed into it. It is plastic. Now, my colleague before said awareness is absolutely critical, and I think you absolutely nailed it, because for leadership and successful leaders, they rely on self-awareness. And if you live inside an organism which is working away doing things, making you feel certain ways, making you react certain ways, and you're not aware of it, well then you're behaving in ways that are hurting you. You need to become aware of it. Let me do a quick losing of the jacket first off, because it's warm up here. Let me do a quick observation test. I'm going to show you a little piece of movie. It takes about 30 seconds. I just want you to watch very closely, and at the end I'm going to ask you 3 or 4 questions. Okay, so just pay attention very closely. Make sure you don't miss anything. and I'll ask you 3 or 4 questions at the end of this. Let me ask you, what did you notice? What did you notice? Some of you smiled because you knew this film before, and yet you all reacted the same way. Notice what you noticed. Tell me one thing, anybody, what did you notice in the moment that that happened? What did you notice? Anything? Which? The car disappeared. Okay. What did you notice inside you? What happened? You were scared. How did that feel? What did it feel like? How did you know you were scared? You felt it. Okay. Anybody feel the hair sticking up on the back of the neck? Did anybody move in their chair? Let me tell you, in case you didn't notice, 99% of you moved in your chairs. Even the few over here who had seen it before went, What happened in that moment? What happened in that moment was a small part of your brain, you've heard of it, called the amygdala, a small part of the brain that was born in our ancestors and designed to protect us from life-threatening situations, immediately routed all of the blood in your body, started moving it towards your muscles so that you could either run away or fight. You could protect yourself. It switched off your digestive process. It switched off every unnecessary process. It flooded your system with adrenaline and noradrenaline. Okay? It got your pineal gland flooding you and getting your muscles all tensed up, your heart rate increased, you felt the hair stand on the back of your neck, and you were ready for action. You were one of those, if you're a female, you were one of those mothers who, seeing the child trapped under the car, ran over and picked up half a ton of car and saved the child. Because your body got you ready to do it. Now, here's the problem. We don't, very often, meet genuinely life-threatening situations in our day-to-day work. You logically knew 2 seconds after you got that fright, you said, this is not a danger to me, but your heart was still racing. Your digestion was still shut down. You were still flooded with adrenaline, and you had expended in that moment an enormous amount of energy. This little guy here, I don't recommend you do this at home, but if you stuck some pencils into your ear, and pencils into your eyes, where those pencils cross would be 2 little almond-shaped organs. And that is just a simple clearing center that when it sees or hears a threat says, start the machine, get him going. So it was designed just so that you could fight, flight, or I love the rabbit's response, isn't it great? You can't see me, you can't see me. Freeze. Now, even though we don't live in a world where we face many physical threats, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the American military described the political environment as being VUCA. And this is a term that has found its way into the business world over the last 10 years. They said that we now live in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And what you're seeing in all the business literature now is you're talking about VUCA this and VUCA that. And you think of the world that every one of us live in. Now, it is volatile, it is uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous. And every single day we get triggered by things like that little fright. You get an envelope, drops into your hall, and it's from the tax authorities. Your heart starts racing, your digestion is switched off, noradrenaline is flooded through your system. It's not life-threatening, your brain says that, but your body is on high alert right away. And it leads to what, and I think this is one of the best expressions ever, it leads to the revving amygdala. Now, revving, for the translators in case it's an unusual one. If you sit into a car, and it's not in gear, and you put your foot on the accelerator, and it starts turning over, it starts doing revolutions. In English we would say, we're revving the engine. And what are you doing when you rev the engine? You're making a lot of noise, creating a lot of pollution, you're putting wear and tear on the engine, you're burning fuel, and you're going nowhere useful. We get triggered so often in an average day that our amygdala never recovers back to relaxed. It's revving. And a tremendous amount of the people that work with you and work for you have an amygdala that has been triggered so often that they can no longer deal with it. First time the stressor occurs, no problem. Second time, because it burns an enormous amount of energy, yeah, I can cope with that. And eventually, the tank is empty. You sit there revving the engine, it's going nowhere, you're destroying the engine, you're burning fuel, eventually it's just dead. And that's what we call executive burnout. And an enormous amount of people are in this place right now. They have revving amygdalas. Look at the nature programs. You got 200 deer, and the tiger runs out, or the lion runs after the deer or the antelope, and he grabs one. The others don't stand there and say, oh my God, Jesus Christ, that could have been me. What if he had got me? Oh my God, thank God it was him. They don't, they just say, okay, that's over. And they go about their business, they switch it off. We don't. We're really clever. We think about it. Oh my God, what if I had got a big bill from the last week? What if that was bad news? Did anybody ever call you late at night, unexpected, and you had that same reaction? And you maybe even said, oh Jesus, what's wrong? That's my mother. Oh my God, it was blind eye. Yeah, your mind goes there. Well, this is a great example of that tiny little part of your brain, which is very, very primitive and knows nothing, being utterly and completely hijacking the part of your brain that knows everything. My mindfulness coach uses this analogy. He says, we've developed over the last several 100,000 years this huge brain, you know, this piece here, which right behind your forehead is everything you are, who you are, your personality, whether you're happy, you're sad, how you deal with the world, the intelligent part that knew, he was just playing a joke on us. Seconds after that you got that fright, it knew he's just playing a joke on us. Well, with the revving amygdala, what happens is that tiny little primitive part takes control of that big elephantine part of the brain that knows that it wasn't a threat and knows it wasn't a problem and it hijacks it. And he talks about it being like a little boy riding an elephant. We get continually hijacked. Now that is a really bad effect. If you look at, this is the part of the brain I'm talking about. That whole front. If you've ever dealt with anybody, I used to be involved with a charity in Ireland for acquired head injuries. If you've ever dealt with somebody who's had a really traumatic injury to that sort of part of their brain, they can change from being one personality to another, from being happy to utterly depressed, from being one person to being another person entirely. This is really who you are. And this right-hand side here, this right frontal lobe, is the part of your brain where when you're stressed, or you're sad, or you're under pressure, or you're worried, where if you went on an MRI scan, you would see lots of electrical activity. And when you're worried, and you're anxious, and you're stressed, this part of your brain lights up like New Year's Eve firework display. And what's interesting is, when it lights up, it makes you feel worried, anxious, and sad. And when you feel worried, anxious, and sad, it lights up. And when it lights up, you feel worried. And so, if you've ever had that experience of being in a great place 1 minute, and one thing goes wrong, and you go, oh, and you go from elation to depression, that's what happened. You got into the loop. Now, the problem with that for leaders is it creates what the psychologists call an avoidance approach to things, an avoidance frame of mind. That is, when we're continually anxious and worried and sad, we tend to be living a life that is informed by the need to avoid risk and danger. We are continually just worried about what we can do to keep ourselves safe. That is not a good place for a leader. Avoidance frame of mind. Activity in the right correlates to an avoidance frame of mind. Left-hand side correlates to when you're feeling alert, anxious, enthusiastic, joyful. And again, you've got that closed loop. When you feel energized, and you feel joyful, and you feel alert, that part of you lights up like the 4th of July in the United States. And when it lights up, you feel energized, you feel joyful, and you feel alert. And when you feel that way, it lights up, and so on and so forth. And the extent to which we are generally more joyful and enthusiastic or worried and anxious is the extent to which we have is a direct correlate to the balance between the activity of those two sides of the brain. Why am I bothering to tell you that? Well, let me just tell you as well. A person who lives with more activity on that side of their brain is by default more reward-oriented. They're approach-oriented. They're looking for opportunities. They're not looking for the bogeyman around every corner. They're looking for opportunities. So, the reason I wanted to tell you that is because all of that research points at what we're talking about today. And now I'm going to say the M word. Mindfulness meditation has been shown over the last 35 or 40 years to increase left frontal lobe activity, to increase the activity in the part of your brain that makes you energetic, enthusiastic, and joyful, to reduce the activity in the right frontal lobe, and to switch off the amygdala. A simple technique that can completely change, because the brain is plastic, the balance between the right and the left-hand mode. If you are somebody who, like me, suffers or suffered from that tendency to go into spirals down or spirals up, this is great news. There is control. You can take control of it. So here's our little control center, our little amygdala we're talking about. And generally speaking, what happens here, you get that fight, some noise comes along, something comes along, the boss sends you an email and says, come to my office, and it sets off the alarm bells, the fear response starts, your heart starts beating, and so on and so forth. However, if you can start conditioning and getting the frontal part of your brain working more effectively, what you do is increase the ability to take some of that traffic that would normally trigger that fear response, normally trigger that amygdala, and take control of it. You can create a situation where your amygdala only switches on when it should switch on. Because there are times when it's usefully frightened. I'll tell you what, when you're making a presentation, the person who says, yeah, I'm perfectly ready for this presentation, I have no stress, they're going to screw up. Every time. You should be a little bit stressed, because then you'll be paying attention. So there are times when it's appropriate when you want that. So that was your circuitry. Then they talk in this model about inner content. Now inner content is that next level up from the circuitry. If you like, it's almost like the operating system sitting over the hardware. And it's really about the raw emotions and the gut feelings and the inner dialogue that goes on inside you. Because every one of us lives with an inner dialogue. We all have a commentary talking about, what's this Irish guy talking about? Look at the size of that nose. I wonder what's going on at home. We have that. And it's a good thing in a lot of situations, but it can become a very bad thing. It can become a bad thing in situations where we allow it to fall into what the Americans would call shoulda, woulda, coulda. Something goes wrong and you say, oh my God, I really should have done this and I should have done that. So instead of being here and saying, deal with the problem, move right back into the past that you can do nothing about and say, oh, I really should have done this and I wish I had, and if only. Or, if only, I hope this happens. We move into the future, which we can't influence by thinking about it, except for what we do here. So we continually got these raw emotions roiling through us, driving this dialogue. And when people talk about having gut feelings, you gotta listen to that. You live in your gut. Your consciousness is distributed through your body, and your gut is very frequently a great indication of your emotional state. And so you've got these emotions rushing through you. They are affecting you've got this chemical machine working underneath. That's driving the emotions, which is driving the inner dialogue, which determines how you respond day to day. And again, I'll come back to my colleague and say, I'm going to paraphrase you. And she said, it's, broadly speaking, it's not what happens to you that's important, it's how you react to what happens to you that determines your fate. And these narratives, what's going on in our head at any one time, this inner dialogue, very frequently on autopilot determines where we're going, because we're not aware enough to take control of that dialogue. How many people here have any sort of managerial or leadership responsibilities? Anything at all? Okay. So this has been you at some stage over the last couple of weeks. That goes with the territory. Something always goes wrong. And I don't know what it is, but something, let's use the American expression, something hits the fan. Okay? And where do we go most? The majority of people that you talk to, they immediately zoom into either the past or the future. Okay? The future is the most common one. Salesperson gets a call that says, you know that 500 grand deal that I've been promising you for 8 months? We're not doing it. Oh my God, what if they don't buy the other one? What if all my other clients call and say that they don't want to buy? What if my boss finds out and I lose my job? What if I lose my job and I can't pay my mortgage? What if I can't pay my mortgage and they throw me out of the house? And what if I end up on the street and I end up having to sell my body? I won't make much money that way. Oh my God. What if? Catastrophizing. Something goes wrong, and what do? We are hardwired to catastrophize, or we go back to if only. Oh God, I wish I had sent him 6 bottles of wine at Christmas. Maybe I should have given him a little gift somewhere along the way, if only. And our reaction in general, I cannot remember, it was Mrs. Dima, it was Ella who said to me, yes, Michelle, when you get into that stress situation, what do? You speed up. I don't know why, it doesn't make any sense, but you get stressed, what do you start doing? Instead of doing what you should do, which is slow it down, you start going even faster, and you spin that wheel even faster, and you get even further into the future, in the worst possible, or back in the past, doing things you can't do, and again it ends up in burnout. What about this? Have you ever, with one of the people you loved, or somebody who works for you, been in a situation where your wife, your husband, your lover, whomever, somebody that you care for, says something innocent, and before you know where you are, you're 2 sentences down the road reacting in a tirade, an absolute rage. You're asking, how could you possibly say that to me? I am one of the best. And you know, when you're 10 seconds in, holy shit, she didn't mean that. Well, what do? You don't say, oh, I'm sorry, I just realized you didn't mean it. Sorry about that, honey. I'm totally my fault. You don't know. You say, I've started, so I'll finish. It's what we do. And you defend the indefensible. Somebody comes in, they say something, and it happens all the time. We get triggered. What happens is we get stimulated. Our amygdala takes over because it's revving, and we react. It's the most normal thing in the world. And when you're stressed, it's the worst. And the people, unfortunately, that we tend to really hit out at are the people we love. Because you can't do it to the boss. Well, you can't do it to the boss at work. You can do it to the boss at home and potentially get away with it. Whereas in an ideal situation, what you'd want to do is, okay, what's actually going on? Not what might happen in the future, what happened in the past, what's actually going on? And slow the whole thing down, think about it, and then perhaps react. Or respond, I should say, as opposed to react. So in an ideal world, what you'd say is, oh, he just said X. I wonder what that means. And this is the piece that's missing in a world where our amygdala are continually stressed, are continually revving, and the only thing that's missing is awareness. If we can bring awareness to this moment, and we can practice bringing awareness to this moment, nothing will ever trigger us. That's nirvana. But all we want to do is even reduce the number of things that trigger us so that we become aware of it, and then we can, and I'm going to use your word again, set an intention. We can decide what we want to do. We can say, oh, what I need to do is this, and then respond. Instead of autopilot, we have to take control of that. And that's what all of the people in the wellness industry are talking about now when they talk about resilience. Think about it. Resilience is the ability to be here and now so that when something happens, you say, what's the best possible response in this moment? People who are resilient don't get hijacked by negative situations and emotions. The last part of the model, this beyond competency model, was conscious engagement. They said, you need to recognize this is running automatically. And the only way you can change that is bring awareness to it. And the only way you can bring awareness to your emotions, well, not the only way, but the easiest way, is to be able to become aware of what's going on inside you in the machinery. How your gut feels. What you're feeling around the larger part of your body, your torso. We'll talk about that in a moment. Because if you can build that awareness, then you can build that ability to respond instead of simply react. Now, how do you become more mindful? Well, you know what? It's actually relatively easy. Because mindfulness is just about choosing where you place your attention. The problem is most of us don't. So if that's your attention, okay, typically, here's what happens. You say, Anna's sitting there and she's saying, oh, there's Deiric who's doing a great presentation there. I'm really enjoying this. Oh, did my phone just go beep beep? I wonder was that a LinkedIn message? Oh, look at the dress on that lady over there. Isn't that absolutely gorgeous? My God, it's hot in here. Where's the heat? And our attention bounces around like that. And our telephones do that to us. We know when we come into the room, I want to listen to the guy at the front because I'm interested in that. But our attention is continually stolen from us. Mindfulness is about awareness. Awareness is simply about having some way to say, here's where I want to pay attention. Here's what I want to focus on, and that's where you leave it. Having a way to say, here's where I want to pay attention, and realize, oh, I've lost attention, I've lost awareness, and bring it back. That's all mindfulness is, that's all focus is. Because the reality is, all of this macho stuff that went on over the last 25 years about leaders being great multitaskers is BS. And you can look that up. I'm not going to use the words. It's rubbish. We cannot multitask. We are single processor machines. We're either doing one task or we're doing another. If we're doing 5 tasks, we do a little bit of that, and then leave it, and then a little bit, and a little bit, and a little bit. It's very inefficient. It's much more efficient to do this one, get it done, and move to the next one. Put our attention where we want. So that's what we need to train. So how do we do it? How do we go about that training? Well, it's like a gym. If you were in a job where it required you to lift heavy weights and it required you to have really good biceps, Marius, if it required you to have really, really good biceps, you'd have a choice. You could say, I learn on the job. That's going to hurt. Okay? Because the first time you do it, you're not ready to it. That's going to hurt. So what you sensibly would do, you say, I'll spend 10 or 15 minutes in the gym doing repetitions of the action that I need to do in the real world. Well, mindfulness is a gym for the mind. It's doing repetitions of the activity that you need to do to continually focus your attention, to learn where to place your awareness, to give you the confidence to say, I can focus anywhere I want for a long period of time. And because that's not the way we're wired by default in our society today, it can be tricky. How do you get there? Well, we're going to look at 3 ways. One is through the mind, one is the body, and the other is through the mind and the body. A combination of it. And I'm going to give you a flavor because this is not something you can talk about, this is something you have to experience. So we're going to experience about 1 minute of training your mind for focus. And because you've been listening to me for a while, I'm going to let you hear an American gentleman called Marty Borisov. And he wrote a book on 1 moment meditation. And he spoke about a very simple technique, which he's going to share with you. And then we're going to try it out, and then we're going to see how what your experience of it was. So for a moment, just listen to what he has to say, and I'll come back to you just in a moment.
Since you're watching this video, I'll bet you want to meditate, but don't have time. Maybe you've tried to meditate, but had some trouble. Maybe you had a wonderful experience meditating over there, but just can't find that same feeling over here. Well, my name is Marty Borisov, and in this video I'm going to introduce you to the technique of 1 moment meditation. Then you can meditate whenever you need to. Like when you're feeling stressed, or feeling angry, Maybe you're having trouble sleeping. Or you're feeling anxious. Or you just need a new idea. Although one moment meditation is ultimately about meditating in a moment, we're going to start with a minute. We start with a minute because a moment goes by so quickly that it's very hard to notice. But a minute is like a moment with handles on it. You know where it begins and where it ends, so it's easier to grasp. If you're ready, we'll do the basic minute now. You might want to shut the door, or at least tell people you're not available for the next minute. You don't have to tie yourself in knots for this. Just sit with your legs planted firmly on the floor. Try.
Okay, so now we're past the theory. He's going to start giving you a few instructions, and work with me and just follow his instructions. I'll come back in a moment, but just be ready to do what he suggests you do.
I just sit up straight, but don't be rigid. It's as if your head were being lifted up away from the weight of the world. Think of it as cosmic traction. Now put your hands in any position that's balanced, symmetrical, and still. Like this, or like this. During the minute, simply focus on your breathing, moment by moment. Of course, even in the space of a minute, you will get distracted. That's perfectly normal. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. But as soon as you notice that you're distracted, just think, and bring your mind back to your breathing. I'll ring a bell so you know when to start and when to finish. Ready?
So, simple task. In a moment he's going to ask you to close your eyes. And just follow your breathing. Just pay attention to your breathing. And you're going to lose focus on that very, very quickly. This is a kind of unnatural environment. And just the moment you do, don't say, damn, I lost focus. Damn, I'm useless at this. Just notice and bring it back. And here's the point. In that moment where you notice that you've lost focus on your breathing, you've just become more mindful. That's the focus. You've just decided from your awareness to bring your focus back to where you wanted it. This is the repetition we're talking about. So let's let him give us 1 minute to do just that.
Then close your eyes. But one more thing. It's okay to smile. And go. As you open your eyes, notice how you feel right now. Maybe a little bit refreshed.
Now let me ask you, anybody, what did you notice in that 1 minute? Anything? The silence, yeah, the silence, the quiet, okay? It's slightly unnatural to close your eyes in an audience of 250 people, so that's probably not the most settled you've ever been. The silence.
Joy.
Which?
Joy.
Joy. Joy, great, fantastic. Somebody else?
It was very long.
It seemed very long, who said that? Isn't a minute a long time? And yet, a minute of that, taken in the middle of a busy day, can have an extraordinary impact upon you as a long break without having an extraordinary impact upon your day. Great observation. Somebody else. You wanted to sleep. Okay, and you know what? There's a message in that as well. There's possibly a message in that as well. Did anybody notice that despite the fact that you were very intent upon keeping your focus upon your breath, it lasted about 2 seconds? Somebody banged the door and you went, oh, what's that? Oh, and here's the secret. Here's the secret of this. This is the repetitions. In the moment that you notice that you've lost attention upon the breath, and you return it without judging yourself, without beating yourself up, just becoming aware and bringing it back, you have become more mindful. You've started something in that simple exercise. The process is really, really simple. I won't talk about attention just for a moment, but this is really that gym exercise that I spoke about. You want in the real world to be able to place your attention on that presentation that you're developing for next week, or on that report that has to go to the client, or on this email that you're sending, and you want to place it there, and you want to leave it there, and you know it wanders. So you go into your mental gym, and you follow your breath, and you start off being focused upon your breath in the first second. And I guarantee you, every single person loses attention within a few seconds. And you notice, because in that quiet comes the worry, and the fantasizing, and the rumination, and your mind just takes off. You go, blast! They said, focus on the breath. You retain the attentional focus, and you're back. And in doing that, you're doing repetitions. In doing that, you're training attention. When I say I want my attention here, I mean I want it here. When I say I want my attention on my breath, I want my attention on my breath. When I say I want to focus on this presentation, I mean on this presentation. And doing those repetitions is exactly the same as doing the physical repetitions in the gym. Ultimately, what happens is you build that attentional muscle. Distractions become a lesser factor. They are always there. They will always be there, but they become less of a factor. And you can do that with 1 minute. 1 minute can make all the difference in the world. And in fact, on iPhone, you can get an app that at regular intervals throughout the day will go bing and remind you just to take 1 minute. Now, sometimes it's not convenient to close your eyes. Sometimes you're sitting with your boss and you're saying, sorry, that's my bell. I'll be back. It's really not convenient. So you probably have to tune in and find another way of doing things. And there is another way of doing things. Now, people who have seen me speak on body language have probably seen this graphic before. But let me ask you a question.